Be still and cool in thy own mind and spirit, from thy own thoughts. Then thou wilt feel the principle of God, to turn thy mind to the Lord God, whereby thou wilt receive God's strength and power, from whence life comes. Whereby thou wilt receive God's strength to allay all blusterings, storms, and tempests. Good afternoon, friends. That quote from George Fox is the first one that I put to memory. And I did this, I started this project out of my own need for spiritual nurturance and for reminders of the hope and promise that I see when I read early friends' writings. I was going through, and I'm still going through, a lot of hard things in my life, and I wanted to memorize these writings. When I would see certain passages, they would jump out at me, and wanted to memorize them so that I could internalize them and have them in me, in a sense. And the only way I could do that I knew of was to, because my memory's not that good, but if I put something to melody, I can remember it. And so I just picked up that quote and sang it. And it's like the melody, somebody said, "Are you a composer?" once, and I said, "No, I'm not really a composer." It just seems like because I don't read or write music, that I just pick up something and the melody is there. And it sort of goes, it seems to me like anybody could do this. You just sort of read it out loud and we put song to it, and it just is there. And so the melody seems to flow with the words, and it may have something to do with that I grew up in a religious tradition where I sang Latin Gregorian chant all the time, and so that's sort of in my being, I think. But it was interesting to learn that Fox, this quote, this first one I shared, Fox wrote in a letter to, probably many of you know, to Oliver Cromwell's daughter, Elizabeth Cromwell, because Fox had been asked to help heal her. And he was at a distance, and he was known as a healer, and she was going through a rough time. Apparently, it was a disorder, it was an illness of psychological in nature. And so it was interesting to me to learn that those were some of the words he shared with her to soothe her and to help heal her, and those are the words I chose for myself. And it's a good reminder to give thinking a break, and especially when you're worried or distressed, to let the thoughts go and take time to sit and listen. And I think for a lot of us, I still consider myself a newcomer to Quaker practice. I joined about 5 years ago and just started really going regularly to friends in about the year 2000, 2001, around then. But I think for a lot of us, we're not really sure what people are doing in the silence, in the meeting for worship. And I had the good fortune of taking a class from Rex Ambler while I was at Kendall Hill in 2004, 2005. And Rex had done a thorough search of Fox's writings, in part to see whether he had given any directions to early friends about what to do in the silence. And he felt he longed to have some of the spiritual transformation and that he saw in the writings of early friends. He wasn't feeling like it wasn't quite happening for him. He wasn't learning things to shift in his life. And so he found out that Fox had written lots of directives. I'll share one. Stand still in that which is pure, after ye see yourselves and then mercy comes in. After thou seest thy thoughts and temptations, do not think, but submit, and then power comes in. Stand still in that which shows and discovers, and there doth strength immediately come. And stand still in the light, and submit to it, and the other will be hushed and gone, and then contentment comes. Most of the passages from Fox that I used in the course of this project came from Rex's anthology, Truth of the Heart. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The bookstore sells it. If you're not, I highly recommend that anthology of Fox's writings. It's just quotations and organized in such a way that they're very meaningful. And the passages at the beginning of the recording, after I had done all of these different random things, I realized that I could sort of put them in an order. And a number of them seem to speak to the directive of centering what you do in the first step of Quaker practice. Is like George Lakey said last night, let go. And so a lot of the first quotations on the CD are about that, letting go. And stand still in that which is pure. Put yourself in that eternal Christ spirit, and let the light show you what's not in the light, what's in the shadow, what's behind the shadow, and what's behind ego. And the whole idea of emptying oneself, I recently heard an Episcopalian author refer to Quakerism as a kenotic spirituality, which I had to look up in the dictionary and saw that kenotic came from the Greek word kenosis, which means emptying. So over and over again, early Quakers were saying, empty yourself, get rid of your preoccupations, forget your thinking, go down past thoughts to the center, and release control and invite the light in to reveal the truth. And as you know, the experience of the light for early friends and for many of us, if we go there, can be terrifying, because it can show things that we don't want to see. It can show the truth about ourselves and about what we've let happen in the world even. But that's an important first step in the path of deep healing and integration. I'm going to share another one of Fox's quotes that I just loved when I saw this. Ye have no time but this present time. Ye have no time but this present time. Ye have no time but this present time. Therefore prize your time for your soul's sake. In focusing on the writings of early friends, it was wonderful for me to discover in their practice and experience of primitive Christianity connections with Eastern religions that I've explored in my own life, as well as with modern day understandings of human psychology. When I read, last year I read The Power of Now. If any of you, it's sort of a popular current guru, by Eckhart Tolle. I had to laugh because I felt like many of his ideas could have been lifted right out of the writings of Fox and early friends, in that awareness of it is here now. Go there. Let yourself go there now and experience the love and joy that is here now. This passage by Naylor, in a similar vein, offers such sound wisdom for us, I think, today. that's why when my cohorts, Linda Kovic and J.P. Lund, we were sitting around trying to think of what to call this collection, and Linda came up with the idea timeless, that these are timeless Quaker sayings, that there's wisdom that's very important for us today still. And this quote by Naylor, I think, is particularly meaningful, knowing the amount of darkness he experienced in his life, the tremendous sense of isolation even from his dearest friends, the torture in the horrible prisons that he was in, and that even through that he could come out with this idea. Art thou in the darkness? Mind it not, for if thou dost, it will feed thee more. But stand still and act not, and wait in patience till light arises out of darkness and leads thee. Art thou in the darkness? Mind it not, for if thou dost, it will feed thee more. And stand still and act not, and wait in patience till light arises out of darkness and leads thee. What struck me about the personal accounts of so many of these early friends was how strong their experience was of a sweet presence in their midst, in their meetings, and how deeply they felt held in love and joy, even in the worst of possible conditions in the prisons of England. The sense of connection with the Christ Spirit was so healing and so powerful that they were willing and eager, it seemed, much like the early Christians, to forsake all for it. The understanding that the kingdom of heaven is available in the here and now, not in the far-off hereafter, came directly out of this experience of being held in so much joy and love. Fox chastised the Puritans for what he called preaching up sin, and he was considered a heretic for saying that he was not in sin. When one is so in touch with the essence of truth, which is love, there is a restoring to wholeness, a living in love. The passionate words of Joan Vokins, that's one woman I had not heard of before, but I ran across it when, I think it was in Hidden in Plain Sight that I ran into her writings. And she was one of the many early female ministers who left her children. She forsook all. She left her children, her and her husband, to follow her leading to travel in the ministry. And one of the quotations I saw from her, one of her writings was this one that just really stood out for me too. Lord, give me and mine the comfortable enjoyment of thy presence forever, and then try us as thou pleasest. Thy preserving power is all that I desire of thee, and unto it I submit it all. And with thee I leave all, for thou art worthy to dispose of all. And then would life flow in like the river to the comforting and strengthening of soul and body. similarly, another woman, Sarah Blackborough, which actually Michael Burkle right here in front row pointed out to me one time at Ohio Yearly Meeting that I should check her writing out, and I did. She was one of the earliest tract writers, and she expressed her deep connection with the divine in language similar to early Christian female mystics that I have been familiar with from my years in the Catholic tradition. She expressed it with no concern for consistency about such matters as the Trinity or the gender of the divine. This quotation reminds me of George Lakey's talk last night too. It seemed that Sarah Blackborough clearly had a deep understanding of how living in and accepting truth can set you free. Oh, love, truth, and its testimony, whether its witness be to you or against you. Love it, that into my mother's house you all may come, and into the chamber of her that conceived me, where you may embrace and be embraced of my dearly beloved ones. Love is his name, love is his nature, and love is his life. I was in a sort of a Quaker midweek meeting for worship this past year, and we were reading various things, both biblical things, and for a while we were reading from Isaac Pennington's writings. And I was really struck by what an intimate knowledge he had of the journey of the soul, of the phases of development in the soul, and how he even interpreted the story of the Israelites in their journey, the 40 days in the desert, and just 40 days. It was 40. It was more than 40 days here. Years. And just he had such an understanding. And when you read, you don't read this First Testament story the same after you've read Pennington's interpretation of it. And he had a profound understanding of the inner transformation that can come from turning one's will over to God. Give over thine own willing, give over thine own running, and give over thine own desiring to know or be anything, and sink down to the seed which God sows in thy heart, and let that be in thee, and grow in thee, and breathe in thee, and act in thee, and thou shalt find by sweet experience that the Lord knows that, and loves, and owns that, and will lead it to the inheritance of life, which is God's portion. Another quote by Pennington that I love shows the natural outflowing of love toward others when one is in love, when one is connected that deeply. There's not a moral thou shalt not kill, or that thou shalt not. It's just, who would dare think to hurt another person when one is filled with the Spirit? living in harmony with others in community seems to come easier when one is grounded in communion with the divine. Our life is love, our life is peace, our life is tenderness and bearing with each other and forgiving one another and not laying accusations one against another, but praying for each other and helping each other up with a tender hand. One of the things that most attracted me to Quakers was my discovery that women were considered men's spiritual equals from the beginning. I was blown away when I learned that. And I was amazed that a community of friends would honor a woman's spiritual leading to travel in the ministry and agree to support her family while she was gone. One quotation from Fox particularly surprised me in how vehement he spoke out about women's right to speak as a minister of the Spirit. Pardon me if I get a little feisty with this. And may not the Spirit of Christ speak in the female as well as in the male? Who is it that dare limit the Holy One of Israel? For the light is the same in the male and in the female, and it cometh from Christ. And who is it that dare stop Christ's mouth? It occurs to me, I wasn't going to sing this other one, but I'm feeling called to sing it. And let me see, I'm blanking on how it starts. Sometimes that happens. Yeah. Especially in this particular gathering, I think this is a really good one. Let not the sons or daughters or the handmaids be stopped in their prophesying, nor the young ones in their vision, nor the old men in their dreams. So everyone may improve their talents, everyone exercise their gifts, and everyone speak as the Spirit gives them utterance, so that all plants may bud and bring forth fruit to the glory of God. Fox. And also, I want to mention that Esther Muir, who had a lot to do with getting the Quaker Bible Index online, I asked her if she would go through and show all the places where these quotations were referring back to Scripture, because practically every one of these quotations has metaphorical language or actual quotations from Scripture. And so she did that, and that's on the PDF file, and that was helpful to me because I have not been a scripture reading. From my tradition growing up even, we weren't even supposed to read the Bible. It was something that was hidden away. And I've just not ever been really drawn to it, but lately I have been getting more interested. And I think that that's one thing that early friends can, in a sense, do, is bring us back to where did they get these quotes from? You know, and it's fascinating to see how much is there. And it strikes me too that early friends, it's seems like they drew out the best of the scripture. Early friends spoke often of the truth, and we know by that they didn't mean a doctrine to be believed, but rather the eternal Christ Spirit that was calling us all to live now in the kingdom of heaven, or as my Australian friend Jerry Bigley says now, the rule of love. He thinks that's more appealing than the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom. The rule of love. Once convinced of the truth, there is an inner calling to testify it to the world. I loved this simple statement of Margaret Fell's, wherein she describes who Quakers are and what their hopes for others are. We are a people who follow after those things that make for peace, love, and unity. It is our desire that others' feet may walk in the same. We do deny and bear our testimony against all strife and wars and contention. When I first began working as a peace educator in the early 1990s, I hadn't realized that so much of the curriculum the curriculum materials that I was using were developed by Quakers. And growing up in a Catholic Christian tradition, I had always heard and been saturated with love letters. You know, we all know we are Christians by our love, love one another, just always, always. But I think that somehow the Quaker understanding of responding to that of God in each other and drawing out that of God gives a more complete understanding of how to love. And that's meant a lot to me, to see the goodness, to look for the goodness and bring it out. This is a quotation from George Fox that I was happy to hear that notion of there's that of God in everyone. I'm happy to find the full quotation and be able to have that in my heart now. Be patterns, be examples in all countries, places, islands, nations, wherever you come. That your carriage and life may preach among all sorts of people and to them. Then you will come to walk cheerfully over the world, answering that of God in everyone, whereby then ye may be a blessing and make the witness of God in them to bless you. I spent a year sojourning among friends in Philadelphia after my 9 months at Pendle Hill. And I have to say that I am so grateful for the opportunity through the Minnie Jane Artist in Residence Scholarship to get time at Pendle Hill. And my story is in that PDF file, but when I first went to Pendle Hill, I had intended to write at least 10 songs, and I was going to learn how to play the guitar better to accompany myself, and I had all these goals set out, and the committee there, some of the members pulled me aside periodically and said, we just want you to make sure that you're led by the Spirit here, and you don't have to stick to what you wrote in that proposal. And I was totally shocked and cried at the thought that I wouldn't have to be held accountable to something I said I would do. And so that year, I just ended up taking so many classes. As Laura was on staff then, she knows, I just really was drinking in Quaker history and talking to other students, not knowing at the time that would lead to anything musical, at all. I just was feeling bad that I wasn't doing anything creative with music. So the next year, I didn't feel like I was finished with Philadelphia, and I got asked to do an artist in residency at a Quaker school in New Jersey, so I went back up there. And during that time, next 10 months, I volunteered as a docent at Arch Street Meeting House. And if you never, raise your hand if you've been to Arch Street Meeting House. A lot of us from the Midwest haven't. And I absolutely fell in love with that place. It's the largest meeting house in the world. And I gained a great deal of knowledge about William Penn while I was volunteering there, and about the contributions that he made to what I consider the best ideals of our country. And I wish that our history books would say more about Penn's contributions, but I don't think they will, because he was a peacemaker. And at the time that the Quakers were in the majority of the Assembly of Pennsylvania, there was a decided stance against having any kind of militia, any kind of military to protect the colony at that point. And I know that they don't want that in history books, and that they refuse to pay war taxes. So I could talk on and on about William Penn, but for now, I just want to share two passages that I found and loved. One of the things I realized when I was in Philadelphia was that he had named many of the streets that are still there, and he made sure that they were named after trees instead of people, instead of philanthropists or well-known citizens. He named them after trees. It would go a great way to... I'm sorry. I sing these things so many times you'd think I would never forget them. It would go a great way to caution and direct people in their use of the world, if we understood more about the creation of it. For how could we find the confidence to abuse it, while we should see the great Creator stare us in the face in all and every part thereof? And he had such a love of nature from the things I've read. And he also was so far ahead of his time in so many ways. I learned that in the late 1600s he had written quite a detailed essay called describing how they could start a League of Nations in Europe to prevent war. And he had so many ways of having arbitration procedures and ways to resolve conflict peaceably. In that essay, I forget, where are you? You probably know the title of it. Remember the essay about starting a League of Nations? On the Peace of Europe, thank you. Okay. So this quotation is one that I probably saw on the internet somewhere, and I've since have learned not to trust quotations on the internet because they're not always exactly accurate. And in this one, it seems like what somebody did was take an outline of that essay and piece it together as a quotation. So these words are Fox's words, but they weren't said so succinctly in one little... I'm sorry, Penn, thank you. But and I wasn't going to put this on this collection because it's not exactly in a meditative place or in a to do with the Creator or love in one sense, but Penn's vision was so clear that there was a very important role for government, unlike many things that we're hearing that the news tends to cover these days. And I worked all last year with a teacher who goes to all the Tea Party things, and I wanted so much to sing this to her, but I didn't. Peace requires justice. Justice requires love. requires justice. Justice requires law. Law requires government. Law requires government, not only within nations, but also between nations. And I'll close with a quotation from John Woolman that, and I realized that John Woolman was not considered an early friend, like all the others that I included in this collection, but I loved this quotation so much, and I think that Woolman, you know, for so many of us, is like the epitome of Quaker saint, you know, and that his life was in so much alignment with his experience of truth. And Joan, you want to sing this with me? Do you feel up for it?
Two parts.
Two. Uh-oh.
Yes.
Okay. This is the one song chant, I call it, on the recording that has harmony, but the harmony is made from a round. Some friends of mine helped me make this into a round when they heard it. I'll do part one so we can, yeah, we can sing it together once and then we'll do it. Okay. If you know it, I've sung it around at gatherings in the past, so you won't know it, so join in. May we look upon our treasure, our furniture and our garments. May we look upon our treasure, our furniture and our garments, and try to discover whether the seeds of war are nourished by these our possessions. May we look upon our treasure, our furniture and our garments. May we look upon our treasure, our furniture and our garments, and try to discover whether the seeds of war are right which by these our possessions. The seeds of war are nourished by these our possessions. I have time for questions and answers. I don't know if we're okay in the bookstore if I did that. If you want to ask any questions. And also I'd like to pass around a yellow sheet if anybody has any ideas. This is for Quaker Press. If anybody has any creative ideas about how we could use this for outreach, or how we could get this out to the world, this collection, because music somehow, I think, travels over the airwaves, literally. And so just to pass it around, if you have any thoughts or creative ideas for Quaker Press for their, just pass it on to them.